As a neurologist, I never believed in near-death experiences until I had one. After collapsing from sudden cardiac arrest, I was clinically dead for 14 minutes. But in that time, I spent years in another realm. I witnessed breathtaking landscapes, encountered radiant beings, and underwent a life review that changed me forever. A mysterious woman revealed prophecies about my future, and when I returned, nothing was the same. This is my story, a journey beyond death and back. My name is Anna Mitchell. As a neurologist, I had spent years studying the human brain, mapping its complexities, and dismissing stories of white lights and tunnels as hallucinations produced by oxygen-deprived neurons. I had counseled families through grief, explaining how dying minds generate comforting illusions to ease the transition. I had always relied on science, until the night I died. It was an unremarkable evening in May. I had finished a long shift at the hospital, grabbed a quick dinner, and fallen asleep reading in bed. My last conscious memory was getting up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m. Then nothing. No pain. No warning. No gasping for air. One moment I was standing and the next I was gone. But I wasn't unconscious. I opened my eyes, or what I perceived as my eyes, and found myself floating in my living room. The scene before me was surreal. My body, crumpled on the bathroom floor, motionless. The bathroom light cast a sterile glow over the white tiles, highlighting my pale skin. My face was slack, lips slightly parted, eyes closed. I felt no connection to it. I should have panicked, should have screamed, should have felt something, fear, confusion, desperation. Instead, an overwhelming calm wrapped around me like a warm current. My mind was sharp, clearer than it had ever been. I was weightless, unburdened by pain or fatigue, simply aware. I drifted effortlessly, watching as time stretched and contracted in ways I couldn't comprehend. Moments later, or maybe hours, my front door burst open. 2 paramedics rushed inside, their boots heavy against the hardwood floor. My neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, hovered in the doorway, hands clasped to her mouth. She collapsed in the bathroom. I heard her say, her voice thick with worry. I called as soon as I heard a thud. How could I hear her? I was near the ceiling, far from the doorway. And yet, her voice reached me as if she were speaking directly into my ear. One of the paramedics, a tall man with sharp features, knelt beside my body and pressed 2 fingers to my neck. He shook his head. No pulse. His partner, a woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail, set down the defibrillator. Starting compressions. I watched as she placed her hands on my chest and began to pump. The rhythmic force pushed against my ribs, but I felt nothing. No pain, no pressure. Just detachment. Time blurred again. A second team of paramedics arrived, advanced life support. I recognized the green uniforms. One of them, a middle-aged man with graying temples, took over chest compressions while another prepped the defibrillator. Charging to 200, someone said. I braced for the shock, instinctively expecting to feel the jolt ripple through me. But nothing came. Clear. My body arched violently on the bathroom floor. I hovered in silence, watching. Still no pulse. Again, charging to 300. Another shock. More compressions. More urgency. I wasn't concerned. Not about my body. Not about what was happening in that tiny bathroom. There was no sense of loss, no lingering attachment to the life I had left behind. My thoughts weren't consumed by unfinished business, unpaid bills, or missed opportunities. It was as if those concerns had never mattered in the first place. I realized then that I wasn't bound by space in the way I had been in life. If I focused, I could shift perspectives effortlessly. I drifted closer to the paramedics, observing the tension in their shoulders, the sweat forming along their brows. Their emotions were palpable, determination, frustration, a quiet resignation creeping in. Then I moved beyond them. I was in the hallway, where my neighbor clutched her robe, whispering prayers under her breath. Then, the front porch, where the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance cast eerie reflections on the wet pavement. I could hear everything. A police officer was speaking into his radio, asking for a status update. Another neighbor, a young man I barely knew, stood at the edge of his driveway, arms crossed over his chest. "She's a doctor," he murmured to himself. How the hell does a doctor just drop dead? I wanted to tell him that I wasn't dead, that I was here right in front of them, that I was listening, seeing, existing. But no one could hear me. And oddly, I didn't mind. Inside, the paramedics had intubated my body, forcing air into my lungs. My skin had taken on a bluish tint, my fingers limp and lifeless. 14 minutes down, someone said. If we don't get a rhythm soon, I understood the implications. Brain damage was almost inevitable after 10 minutes without oxygen. I should have been worried, should have felt an urge to return. Instead, a realization settled over me with profound certainty. I don't belong there anymore. At that moment, something shifted. The room around me darkened, as if someone had dimmed the lights. The figures of the paramedics became indistinct, their movements blurred. A soft humming sound, more vibration than noise, filled the space around me. Then, as gently as a breath, I felt something touch my shoulder. A presence. Not physical, not human, but undeniably there. I turned, expecting to see someone, another paramedic, maybe a figure I recognized. Instead, I saw nothing. Just an expanse of endless dark, stretching beyond what my mind could comprehend. Then a voice. Warm. Feminine. Familiar, though I couldn't place it. "Anna, it's time to go." I had no reason to resist. No fear. No hesitation. I closed my eyes, and the world dissolved around me. The moment I closed my eyes, everything changed. The frantic scene in my bathroom, the paramedics, the flashing lights, my lifeless body, was gone in an instant. No slow fade, no gentle transition. One moment I was there, and the next I was nowhere. It was an absence of everything. No walls, no floor, no ceiling. Just an infinite darkness stretching beyond anything my mind could grasp. But it wasn't the kind of darkness that evoked fear. It was deep, vast, peaceful. Then a shift. A pinprick of light appeared in the distance, barely more than a flicker. At first, it was motionless, suspended in the void. Then it grew, slowly at first, then rapidly, expanding outward like a rising sun. It wasn't just light. It was pulling me. I felt no physical movement, yet I was being drawn toward it, my form weightless and fluid. There was no wind, no resistance, just an inevitable pull, as if I belonged to it. Then I saw them. They emerged from the periphery, forming from the void itself. Dozens of glowing orbs, deep blue with streaks of white energy flickering across their surfaces. They pulsed with life, their light undulating in rhythmic waves, communicating without words. I knew they were alive. They hovered around me, maintaining a careful distance, their movements synchronized yet organic. They were watching me, studying me, assessing me. I wasn't afraid. The orbs vibrated with an energy I could feel rather than hear, a hum that resonated through me like an unspoken question. Though they never spoke, I understood them. You are here, but not yet meant to be. The realization should have shocked me, but it didn't. I understood. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not yet. But I had no control over my presence. I reached out, not with my hands but with my awareness, toward the nearest orb. As soon as I focused on it, I felt a connection, a stream of energy flowing between us. Memories flashed, not mine, but theirs. Glimpses of something ancient, intelligent, and endless. A presence that had always existed, watching, guiding, unseen. These beings weren't human. They weren't angels in the way religious texts describe. They were something else. Pure energy, pure awareness. And they knew me. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. No fading, no drifting away. Just gone. The light around me pulsed once, and in its wake, the darkness returned. I exhaled, or, at least, I felt the sensation of exhaling. Even though I had no lungs, no breath, I still felt. Then, the tap on my shoulder came again. Gentle. intentional,
familiar,
I turned, but there was no one there. Just a shift in the space around me, a subtle change in the energy. Then a voice,
soft, feminine,
filled with something deeper than warmth, something ancient, knowing. Anna, it's time to go. It was the same voice I had heard before. The darkness around me shifted, folding inward like mist drawn by an unseen wind. Then came the fog, a thick, silvery haze that wrapped around me, disorienting but not oppressive. It moved as though it had weight, swirling and shifting, guiding me forward. I wasn't walking, but I was moving. Then, as suddenly as I had entered it, I emerged into light, and the world that unfolded before me took my breath away. I stood in a vast, rolling field that stretched endlessly in every direction. The air shimmered, not with heat, but with life. Colors were richer, more vibrant than anything I had ever seen on Earth. The sky, an endless gradient of gold and deep violet, pulsed as though it was alive. Below me, flowers, millions of them, covered the ground like a living carpet. Their petals glowed faintly, each emitting a soft luminescence. They weren't just there, they were aware of me. As I gazed at them, I felt their consciousness, their recognition of my presence. I took a step forward, expecting to feel the weight of my body shift. But I was weightless. My form was there, tangible, but not constrained by mass or gravity. I glanced down and gasped. I had feet again, a body, but not the one I had left behind. This form was lighter, radiant, infused with something beyond physicality. A warm breeze moved through the field, carrying with it a sound, music, but not from an instrument. It came from everything, the sky, the flowers, the very air itself. A harmonious, endless melody that pulsed with the rhythm of the universe. I wasn't just hearing it. I was part of it. I turned, expecting to see the presence that had spoken to me. And then she was there. A woman, standing just a few feet away, her presence as familiar as my own thoughts. She was both young and ancient, her features shifting subtly in a way that made her ageless. She wore a flowing garment of pure light, and her eyes held the depth of galaxies. I didn't need to ask who she was. I knew. She had been with me before, though I couldn't recall when. She smiled gently, her gaze filled with something I could only describe as understanding. "You have questions," she said. I nodded. "Then walk with me, and I will show you." She turned and began moving through the field, her steps effortless, as if gliding. I followed without hesitation, stepping deeper into the unknown. And for the first time in my existence, I felt truly home. I walked beside the woman, my bare feet brushing against the glowing flowers that blanketed the landscape. But they didn't bend or break beneath me. Instead, they shifted gently, parting just enough to let me pass, as if they were aware of my presence and honoring it. The sensation was indescribable. I could feel the flowers, not just physically, but energetically. They emitted a soft hum, a resonance that pulsed in harmony with everything around us. Each one radiated a unique frequency, a note in the vast symphony of this world. I looked down at myself, taking in my new form. I had a body, but it wasn't the same as before. There was no heaviness, no resistance, no imperfections. My hands moved with fluid ease, my fingers glowing faintly with an inner light. I felt whole in a way I never had before, unburdened, unrestricted, completely free. "This place," I whispered. "What is it?" My guide smiled as we walked, her presence radiating warmth and serenity. "You already know." And I did. Somewhere deep inside, I recognized this place. Not from memories of my earthly life, but from something older, more profound. This was not a dream. It was not an illusion. It was real. And reality, here, did not follow the same rules I had known before. I glanced at a distant ridge, its jagged peaks stretching impossibly high, their surfaces shimmering like liquid crystal. I focused on the base of the mountains, wondering what it would feel like to stand there. In an instant I was there. The shift was seamless, as natural as breathing. One moment I had been in the meadow, and the next, I was at the foot of the towering peaks. I felt no rush of air, no sensation of movement, just the immediate realization that I was exactly where I had intended to be. I turned, half expecting to see my guide still in the meadow. But she was already beside me, unfazed. "You see," she said gently, "thought here is action."
Intention is krízisen.
A realization settled over me. There were no limits in this place.
No restrictions.
If I wished to soar over the mountains, I could. If I desired to walk on water, I would. This world was shaped by consciousness itself. As we moved forward, the landscape shifted effortlessly around us. Rolling meadows gave way to lush valleys where rivers of golden light flowed like liquid energy. The air shimmered with color beyond the visible spectrum, hues that my earthly eyes had never been capable of perceiving. And the music. It was everywhere. Not coming from any particular source, but resonating from the world itself. A continuous melody woven into the very fabric of existence. It was neither loud nor intrusive, but deeply harmonious, as if everything, every rock, every leaf, every breath, was part of an unending composition. And I was part of it too. With every step, I felt the song within me, vibrating through my being, merging my essence with the rhythm of the universe. I wasn't merely hearing the music. I was the music. As we ascended a gently sloping path, I became aware of other beings in the distance. They moved gracefully through the valley, radiant figures glowing with a soft, inner light. Though their forms were humanoid, they weren't bound by rigid shape or structure. Some shimmered with translucent energy, shifting subtly as they walked. Others had features more defined, yet still fluid, ageless, luminous, alive in a way that transcended physicality. And the joy they exuded, it was overwhelming. There was no anxiety here, no sorrow, no fear. Only a deep, profound peace, woven with a sense of connection beyond anything I had ever experienced. These beings weren't strangers. They were familiar in a way that bypassed memory. They knew me, and I knew them. As we passed, some acknowledged me with warm smiles, their gazes filled with recognition. But no words were spoken. They didn't need to be. Communication here was effortless, immediate. I could feel their thoughts as if they were my own, not as intrusive voices, but as shared understanding. A flow of pure awareness, untainted by misinterpretation or doubt. "Welcome home," one of them conveyed. Home. The word resonated through me, awakening something I hadn't realized was missing. We continued walking, and soon, the landscape transformed again. Rising before us was a city, though to call it a city felt inadequate. It was an expanse of breathtaking structures, each one seemingly alive, humming with energy. The buildings weren't made of stone or metal, but of something far more fluid, something that responded to thought and presence. Great towers stretched into the sky, their surfaces shifting and pulsing, as if breathing. Archways and domes radiated a soft luminescence, and pathways wove through the city like flowing rivers of light. And there were no doors.
No need for them.
Movement here was effortless, unrestricted. Those who wished to enter a building simply willed themselves inside, and they were there. I watched as a figure approached a grand structure, its spires gleaming with opalescent hues. Without breaking stride, the figure vanished through the wall, their form dissolving into light before seamlessly reappearing inside. It was then that I realized something profound. This place, this realm, was not built the way cities on Earth were. It had not been constructed with hands, brick by brick. It had been created, willed into existence by the very consciousness of those who inhabited it. I turned to my guide, overwhelmed by the beauty, by the magnitude of what I was seeing. Who made all of this? She met my gaze, her eyes filled with knowing. We all did. I tried to process the implications of her words, but they were too vast, too expansive to grasp all at once. She extended her hand.
Come.
There is still more to see. I hesitated, glancing once more at the glowing city, the beings moving through it in perfect harmony. I didn't want to leave. For the first time since arriving, I felt a flicker of apprehension. Not fear, but something close, a resistance to moving forward, a longing to stay where I was. She must have sensed it because she placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "There is no loss here," she said gently. "Only discovery." I exhaled, a reflex I no longer needed but still performed out of habit. And I followed her into the heart of the city, deeper into the unknown. The city pulsed with energy as my guide led me toward a towering structure at its heart. Unlike the other fluid, living buildings, this one stood with a solemn presence, its form stretching beyond what my mind could fully grasp. It was both physical and ethereal, shifting between solid radiance and pure energy. I felt its significance before we even reached the entrance. This was a place of knowing. The air around me vibrated with a deep, steady hum as we stepped inside. The walls, if they could be called that, were made of shifting waves of light, their colors shifting between gold, blue, and violet. The ceiling stretched infinitely above, no end in sight, filled with cascading patterns of energy that seemed to ripple like water. At the far end of the hall, 3 immense figures stood waiting. They weren't human, nor were they confined to a single form. Their bodies pulsed with light, swirling currents of energy shifting in constant motion. They were taller than anything I had ever seen, their presence vast, yet not intimidating. I knew them instantly, not by name, because they had none. They simply were. They were the Watchers. Not judges, not executioners, but witnesses.
Guides.
As I approached, a pedestal formed before me, smooth, glowing, and iridescent. Atop it, a small, radiant box appeared. It pulsed in sync with my own energy, waiting. I didn't need to be told what it was. It contained me. Every action, every word, every thought I had ever had. My entire existence, wrapped in this single, luminous object. My guide placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You must open it." I hesitated, a sudden tension forming within me. I had no reason to fear, and yet a weight settled in my chest. There were things I had done, small, careless actions I had long forgotten, words I had spoken without thought, moments I had dismissed. But they were all here. I reached forward and lifted the lid. The moment I did, the hall around me vanished, replaced by an endless expanse of floating, glowing orbs. They stretched into eternity, each one vibrating with an unseen force. And within each orb, a memory waited. I reached for the nearest one. As soon as my fingers made contact, the world shifted, and I was inside the memory. It was a simple scene, one I had long forgotten. I was 6 years old, standing in my childhood backyard. My hands gripped a small garden spade, and before me, a young tree sapling stood freshly planted. My mother was beside me, smiling as I patted the dirt around its base. It was a moment of pure innocence. But I wasn't just watching. I was myself again, feeling everything. The warmth of the sun on my skin, the texture of the soil between my fingers, the quiet joy in my mother's presence, the love in her eyes. I pulled away, and the memory dissolved. I reached for another. This time I was 14, sitting in a high school cafeteria, laughing with friends. But my laughter was at the expense of another girl, one who sat alone, her eyes cast downward as she picked at her food. I felt the sting of my own words. Then I became her. I was inside her mind, feeling her shame, her loneliness, the way my careless joke had cut into her. It was a wound that I had forgotten within minutes, but she had carried it for years. The emotions were amplified, raw and overwhelming. Tears formed in my eyes as I let go of the memory. The orbs weren't just showing me my life. They were making me live it, again and again, from every perspective, every careless word, every moment of kindness, every time I had hurt or helped someone, whether intentionally or not. The ripples stretched further than I had ever imagined. Some memories were beautiful. I saw an elderly patient I had once comforted in the hospital, felt the warmth of her gratitude. I saw a time when I had smiled at a stranger on a particularly bad day for them, unknowingly shifting their entire mood. But others were painful. I saw moments where I had been too busy, too distracted, too indifferent to see the suffering of those around me. Times I could have helped, but didn't. Words I had said, without considering their weight. I became all of them, not just the people, the animals, the plants, the very air that had carried my breath. Every action had an echo, and here, in this place of knowing, there was no escaping them. I sank to my knees, overwhelmed. Tears fell, but not from sorrow alone. There was something else, something deeper. Understanding. I had not been perfect. I had made mistakes. But so had everyone. And the beings before me, they weren't condemning me. There was no judgment here. Only awareness. The only one who needed to forgive me was me. My guide knelt beside me, her voice gentle. You see now. I nodded, wiping at my face, though no physical tears remained.
Ido.
She gestured toward the countless remaining orbs. Are you ready to continue? I exhaled, then reached for the next one. And for what felt like years, I processed them all. Every action, every thought, every ripple. By the time I reached the last memory, I was no longer the same. I had seen my life for what it was, not as a sequence of random events, but as a vast, interconnected web. And when the final orb dissolved into light, I rose to my feet, lighter than I had ever felt. The watchers stood silently, their forms glowing with quiet approval. The box before me faded, its purpose fulfilled. My guide smiled.
Come.
There is more to see. And as I turned to follow her, I knew, without doubt, that I was ready. The luminous hall of my life review faded, dissolving into nothingness. I expected another transition, another landscape of rolling meadows or glowing cities. But instead, I found myself standing in an infinite white space. There were no walls, no sky, no sound. Just endless, seamless light stretching beyond perception. It was not blinding but warm, pulsing with the quiet hum of existence itself. I turned, searching for my guide, but she was gone. For the first time since arriving in this realm, I felt truly alone. Then, a figure appeared in the distance, a tiny speck against the vast expanse. As she walked toward me, she grew larger, her form gaining shape and clarity. She was a woman, dressed in flowing garments of soft gray and ivory, her silver hair cascading over her shoulders. Her face bore the wisdom of ages, yet her deep brown eyes were sharp, filled with recognition and knowing. She stopped a few feet away, studying me with a gentle intensity.
Anna, she said.
Her voice sent a wave of familiarity through me, though I had never seen her before in my life. I swallowed. Who are you? She smiled. I am Elena, your great-great-grandmother. My breath caught. I had heard her name before, once, in passing, when my mother had spoken about our ancestors. But I knew nothing about her. She had died long before I was born. How can that be? I whispered. Her expression was soft with amusement. Time does not work here, as it does where you are from. I didn't know how to respond. There were so many questions, so many things I wanted to ask. But she didn't give me the chance. You cannot stay, she said, her tone gentle but firm. Something inside me twisted. I don't understand. She held up a hand, stopping me. Your path is not finished. There are things you must do. People who need you. The weight of her words pressed against me, the meaning clear even before she continued. You must return. The thought sent a pang of resistance through me. No, I said, shaking my head. I belong here. I've seen what's waiting for me. The love, the connection, the peace. Why would I go back to a world of suffering? Her eyes softened with understanding, but there was no hesitation in her voice. Because it is not yet your time. I clenched my fists, frustration bubbling up inside me. How do you know? She stepped forward, reaching out. Though her hand never touched me, I felt warmth radiate through me, a tether forming between us. I have seen the path laid before you, she said. You are meant to bring knowledge to others, to be a bridge between what you know in science and what you have learned here. A weight settled in my chest. You will guide others, she continued, not just as a doctor, but as a healer in ways you have yet to understand. I wanted to argue, to insist that there were others who could take my place, others who could do what she was asking of me. But she wasn't finished. There is a great change coming, a crisis that will shake the foundation of medicine, of humanity itself. You must be there to help. A chill ran through me. What kind of crisis? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed a hand over her heart, a gesture of knowing, of burden. It will be unlike anything the world has seen in your lifetime, and it will begin soon. Her gaze met mine, filled with certainty. When it happens, you must not turn away. You will be needed. My mind raced. A crisis in medicine. A global event. It was too much, too vast to comprehend. But she wasn't done. You will also become a mother, she said, her voice filled with certainty. In exactly 4 years, your daughter will be born. My breath hitched. A daughter?
Yes.
And she will change you in ways you cannot yet see. Tears welled in my eyes. I had never been certain I wanted children. My career had always taken precedence, my ambitions structured and unwavering. But the way Elena spoke, the way the truth of her words settled into my soul, I knew this was real. I pressed a hand to my chest, overwhelmed. How can you know all of this? She smiled softly. Because time is only a veil. I have seen beyond it. I stood there, shaking, torn between the impossible weight of her words and the unbearable thought of leaving this place. I can't go back, I whispered, pleading now. Not after everything I've seen. Not after knowing what's waiting here. She studied me for a long moment, sorrow flickering in her ancient eyes. If you do not return willingly, she said, you will be sent back. Her words sent a shiver through me. There is no choice in this, Anna, she continued gently. Only acceptance. The finality in her voice struck me like a blow. I shook my head. Please, I begged, though I wasn't even sure what I was asking for. She reached forward, her fingertips brushing my forehead. The moment she made contact, a force unlike anything I had ever known wrapped around me. It was a pull. Violent.
Sudden.
Absolute. I gasped, feeling my very essence being wrenched backward, away from her, away from the endless light. No, wait. I cried out, reaching for her, but she was already fading. The white space fractured, shattering like a mirror. And then pain. Raw, suffocating, crushing pain. I was drowning. I gasped, my chest heaving, lungs burning as air was forced into them. My body felt heavy, wrong, foreign to me. A deep ache radiated through my ribs, my limbs trembling as sensation flooded back into me. Distant voices echoed around me. Urgent, frantic. She's back. 14 minutes down. Jesus Christ, she's breathing. My vision swam as I blinked against the harsh, fluorescent hospital lights. Shadows moved above me. Doctors, nurses, hands pressing against my arms, checking monitors. I was back. I tried to speak, to tell them what had happened, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was raw, my body weak. But I remembered everything. The white space. The prophecy. The certainty that my life had changed forever. And as tears slipped down my cheeks, I realized something else. I had come back for a reason. And my journey was only just beginning. I woke with a gasp, my lungs burning as if I had been submerged underwater for hours. Air rushed in, but it felt foreign, heavy, unnatural. My chest ached with each breath, my ribs sore from the compressions that had forced life back into me. Harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead, their sterile glow stabbing into my retinas. I squinted, disoriented, my body sluggish and unfamiliar. My limbs felt weighted, my skin too tight, as though I had been crammed back into a form that no longer fit. A figure loomed over me. A nurse. Dr. Mitchell? Her voice was soft, cautious. "Can you hear me?" I tried to answer, but my throat was raw, my vocal cords refusing to cooperate. "You're in the hospital," she continued, her expression gentle yet filled with awe. "You went into cardiac arrest. You were gone for 14 minutes. 14 minutes. I squeezed my eyes shut, memories flooding back. The meadow, the music, the glowing city, the watchers. My great-great-grandmother's prophecy. I had been there for years.
Years.
And yet, here I was, back in this body, in this world where everything felt muted, colors duller, sounds harsher, emotions heavier. But the memories of the afterlife remained crystal clear. Unlike a dream, they did not fade with time. If anything, they strengthened. The weeks that followed were a blur of medical evaluations, questions, and disbelief. My colleagues marveled at my survival, calling it a medical miracle. But I knew the truth. This was no miracle. It was a return, a mission. At first, I struggled to adjust. My senses felt heightened, my intuition sharper than ever before. I could anticipate people's emotions before they spoke. Sometimes I knew what they were going to say before they said it. And then came the premonitions. Small things at first, a feeling that a patient would take a turn for the worse before the monitors showed any change, an inexplicable knowing when a family needed comfort before they received bad news. But as time passed, the visions grew stronger. One night, I woke with a start, my heart pounding. A single thought echoed in my mind, undeniable and absolute. A great medical crisis is coming. Be ready. Elena's warning. I couldn't ignore it. So, I did what I had never imagined myself doing. I stepped beyond the walls of medicine and into the realm of the unknown. I began researching near-death experiences, connecting with others who had returned with knowledge beyond this world. I became an advocate, a bridge between science and spirituality. For so long, I had believed only in what I could see, touch, measure. Now I understood there was so much more. Death was not the end. It was merely a transformation. And my purpose was clear: to help others awaken, to align their lives with love, awareness, and the undeniable truth that we are all connected, always.